One day, my mother-in-law suddenly declared, "You're going to take care of your father-in-law for the rest of your life. I'm going to live with my new daughter-in-law." She was basically telling me that my husband was having an affair and she was supporting it. Furthermore, they planned to live at the mistress's house. At my in-law's house, my father-in-law, who was wheelchair-bound and needed care, was left behind. Despite this, my husband and his mother went to the mistress's house. What they did was, of course, unforgivable. However, I couldn't just abandon my father-in-law. As I hesitated, my father-in-law finally stood up. "My name is Linda. I'm 30 years old. I've been married to my husband Bob for almost 3 years. At first, we got along so well, but now we don't talk as much. Is this what they call getting used to each other? The more you know each other, the more your love stabilizes and you end up seeking a more predictable life." There was no problem with our marital life, but it could be described as unstimulating. About a year ago, my husband's job got busier and he started working overtime. Business trips, which were almost non-existent before, became a few times a month. However, he always covered the living expenses, and I have a job too. I can't always worry about him. Sometimes, when he comes home early, we have dinner together and make up for the lost time. From the outside, it may look like our marriage is cooling down, but that's not the case. This is the shape of our marriage. This unchanging married life was our norm. Then one day, when I finished work and came home, my husband was already there. Usually, he doesn't come home until after 10 p.m., but it was still 7 p.m. "Welcome back," he greeted me. "Bob, you came home early today. Didn't you have to work overtime?" I replied, "That's not the point. My father had an accident and is in the hospital," he said, his tone serious. "Wait, your father?" According to Bob, his father had been in an accident on his way to work when a car, ignoring a red light, crashed into him. Fortunately, he didn't sustain any fatal injuries, but he was left with paralysis in both legs and one arm, forcing him into a wheelchair. "My father-in-law had an accident? You've got to be kidding." My father-in-law, who loves hiking and fishing, is now wheelchair-bound. That's too pitiful. My father-in-law was an outdoor enthusiast, often taking Bob and me to various places. He treated me like his own daughter and always said, "If you ever have any problems, feel free to rely on me." It was hard to believe that such an active man had an accident. My father-in-law was running his own company, but Bob works for a different company, so we weren't immediately notified about the accident. We only found out when my mother-in-law contacted us. In this day and age, it was frustrating that we couldn't visit him as often as we wanted. My husband Bob started the conversation with a serious look in his eyes. "Well, Linda, Mom asked me to do something about Dad." "What did your mom ask for?" I asked, trying to gauge the situation. "Well, she was wondering if we could help take care of Dad." "Take care of your father?" "Yeah, Mom's been getting on in years, right? So she's finding it difficult to do it all by herself. She wants us to help out. So that means we have to move to your parents' house." "That's right. There's plenty of room at their house and we'll have enough space. What do you think?" I fell silent. I admire my father-in-law and care about him a lot, but I couldn't just say, "Oh sure, no problem," and readily agree to something I've never done before. It's not that I don't care about your father, but I have a job too. Suddenly being asked to provide care. What should I do? I racked my brain, trying to come up with the best solution. But no matter how much I thought about it, no good ideas came to mind. Perhaps sensing my hesitation, Bob took my hand and stared at me straight in the eyes. "Linda, I need you. I know it's going to be tough since it's your first time, but if we leave it all to Mom, I'm worried she might break down too." "Well, I think it will be tough, but I have a job too," I said. "Linda, you can quit your job. I'll earn our living expenses, so can you dedicate yourself to taking care of Mom and Dad?" Bob pleaded, dropping to his knees. "Quit my job?" I was taken aback. "Yes, I'll support us financially. That's why I need you. Our family needs you," Bob continued to plead. Eventually, I agreed to quit my job and focus on taking care of my father-in-law, just as Bob had asked. A few days after we moved in, Bob suddenly announced, "I'll take over my father's company and become the president." Even my father-in-law was surprised by this decision, though he might have been secretly pleased that his son would take over the business. With tears welling up, he said to Bob, "Bob, I can't believe you're saying this after all this time of you saying you wouldn't work at the company." Well, that was, how should I put it? Like playing hearts again. With you in this condition, Dad, I can't just leave the company unattended, can I? Thank you. I was at a loss about what to do with the company. I want to pass it on to someone I could trust. If you're willing to take it over, I would be honored to hand it over to you. I knew you'd agree, Dad. I'll do my best as your son. Yes, I'm counting on you. For the sake of the employees who followed me, please create a good working environment. Of course, Bob agreed. So Bob took over his father's company and my father-in-law transitioned from president to chairman. Although the chairman typically has various responsibilities, my father-in-law chose to leave the company's operations entirely to Bob, retaining only his title. 2 months had passed since Bob took over. Every night, he came home well past midnight. At first, I thought it was just the demands of unfamiliar work causing him to stay late. But the constant overtime seemed excessive. What made me more suspicious was Bob's peculiar scent. One night, unable to fall asleep, I was still wide awake as the late hours rolled by. When I got up to get a glass of water from the kitchen, I heard the front door open. I quickly moved towards the entrance and, upon greeting him with, "Welcome home," I noticed a strong scent of soap coming from him. Seeing me, Bob looked surprised. "What? Why are you up at this hour?" he asked. I couldn't sleep. "Bob, you've been coming home late as usual." "Well, I can't help it, can I? I've taken over my dad's business, and there's a lot I don't know." "I see. You must be having a hard time." "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." As he tried to leave, I caught another whiff of the soap scent. Acting on impulse, I grabbed his arm and confronted him with a stern tone. "Bob, who do you usually work overtime with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What? Why the sudden cross-examination?" he shot back. "No, it's just, I noticed a nice scent coming from you." "Why would I know that? I'm working my ass off. Don't bother me with such trivial things." His irritation was palpable, and it only fueled my suspicions. As I hesitated, unsure of how to press him further, Bob let out an exasperated sigh. "Seriously, can you stop with this? I come home exhausted, and you interrogate me as soon as I get back. That's not a pleasant welcome." "I didn't mean to. I was just curious." "So you're ducking me now? We're living comfortably because I work this hard every day. Do you understand that?" "I understand." "Damn it. If you have time to talk about this nonsense, why don't you use it to do some cleaning?" "I don't have time for this." With that, he stormed off upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room. When I peeked into the bedroom, Bob was absorbed in his smartphone, deliberately ignoring me. Despite my attempts to apologize, he remained distant and unresponsive. The next day, my mother-in-law confronted me with a fierce expression. "Linda, I heard you suspected Bob of cheating yesterday." "I didn't suspect him. I just asked who he was working overtime with," I explained. "That's suspicious enough. You're able to live comfortably because Bob is working hard. Do you realize that?" "I do, and I'm grateful. All I did was voice a concern I had." "That's exactly what I'm telling you is rude. What are you trying to achieve by making Bob uncomfortable? You're the worst wife." After her tirade, she dumped all the housework on me and stormed out. My mother-in-law has never really liked me. Although she pretends to share the household chores in front of my husband and father-in-law, I end up doing all the work. I'm also the one taking care of my father-in-law. My mother-in-law frequently finds excuses to go out, only returning in the evening. My father-in-law, who mostly stays in his room, is unaware how often she leaves. Occasionally, company visitors come by, but he rarely ventures out. Additionally, my mother-in-law has warned me not to share unnecessary information with Bob or my father-in-law. So, I had no choice but to silently manage the housework and caregiving. What made it bearable was the presence of my father-in-law. Every time I did something for him, he would thank me with a pained, apologetic look. "Linda, I'm sorry. You must hate taking care of an old man like me, right?" "That's not the case at all. I think of you, my father-in-law, as my own father. It's an honor to be able to help you." Having you say such things makes me feel lucky. I'm really glad that someone like you married Bob. "Oh my, likewise. I'm grateful to have a kind person like you as my father-in-law." Despite the hurtful actions and words from my husband and mother-in-law, my father-in-law's presence has been a source of comfort. It's my responsibility to help him prepare for bed and turn off the lights. After completing these tasks, I would return to the living room, only to find my husband and mother-in-law there. My husband's face bore a nasty grin, suggesting he had been conversing with my mother-in-law about something unpleasant. I had a sinking feeling in my gut. The next moment, my mother-in-law spoke words that confirmed my worst fears. Oh, good timing. I have something to tell you, something we need to discuss. I'll get straight to the point. You'll need to take care of your father here for the rest of your life. Mother-in-law, what are you talking about? I've decided to live with a new daughter-in-law, and Bob will be with me too. A new daughter-in-law? I was stunned into silence. My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the situation. A new daughter-in-law? What in the world is she talking about? Why isn't Bob saying anything? As if to mock my shock, Bob slid a divorce paper in front of me. I have a girlfriend. Mom and I have decided to move in with her. But what? I'm packing up now and leaving with Mom. Whether or not you sign the divorce papers is up to you. But either way, it's your responsibility to take care of Dad. No way. The weight of the situation crashed down on me, and I crumpled to my knees. Bob and my mother-in-law began packing their things, leaving me behind. Tears began to flow in the quiet living room. Just then, my father-in-law appeared in his wheelchair, his eyes full of concern. Linda, it's quite noisy. What's going on with Bob and his mother? My father-in-law asked. Father-in-law. Hey, why are you crying? What exactly happened? I explained the conversation I had with Bob and his mother. As I spoke, my father-in-law's expression grew increasingly tense. By the time I finished, his eyes had a determined gleam. He stood up with unexpected strength. Linda, it's time for a counterattack. Huh? Your legs? Sorry for keeping it a secret. The truth is, I've been able to walk for a while now. It's okay, leave everything to me. The preparations are already in place. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a large brown envelope, revealing its contents to me. Father-in-law, what's this? Inside were pieces of evidence not only of Bob's infidelity but also of my mother-in-law's. According to him, since Bob became president, he had employed trustworthy staff to monitor Bob's activities at the company. As a result, it was discovered that my husband was leaving work precisely on time every day. Despite this, he came home after midnight each night. My father-in-law had hired a private detective to investigate, who uncovered both my husband's and mother-in-law's affairs. The woman my husband was seeing was also known to his mother, and they had been meeting together. These revelations were new, and my father-in-law had been hesitant about when to share the truth. It's blunt, but I'm glad we talked. Linda, what do you want to do? My father-in-law asked. I want to get back at those two. I see. Leave the rest to me. He made a call on his smartphone to someone from his company. Shortly after, my husband was demoted from his CEO position. I followed my father-in-law's advice, submitting the divorce papers and using the affair evidence to seek compensation through a lawyer. A week later, Bob came to visit his parents' house, likely in response to a certified mail he had received. In front of me and my father-in-law, he yelled defensively. Hey Dad, what's going on? Just because I cheated doesn't mean you need to fire me from the CEO position. Shut up. You neglected your responsibilities, hurt Linda, and betrayed this family. It's a million years too early for someone like you to hold a leadership role. What? Oh, I'm severing ties with you. Don't ever come back to this house. But Bob collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he clung to me, begging desperately. Oh, Linda, please. I don't mind if you retract the divorce, so please convince Dad. I'll end things with my lover, just please drop the compensation claim. Even now, he's only thinking about saving himself. I was completely disillusioned. To release all my pent-up frustration, I spoke with unwavering resolve. What are you talking about now? Retract the divorce. I didn't ask for that. You know what? I'm thrilled to be able to divorce a scumbag like you. There's no way I'll ever go back to being your wife. Do you mean you've already? The divorce papers? Of course. Why would I stay married to someone like you? Being divorced and losing your CEO position, these are all consequences of your own actions. It's the mess you created. But I only used those divorce papers as a threat. I figured as much. I hope you, your mother, and your lover all face the consequences you deserve. Don't expect any help from me. With that, I gave him a dismissive gesture and threw him out the front door. From outside, his desperate pleas echoed through the house. Help me. I was wrong. I won't cheat again, so please forgive me, Linda. Dad, please don't abandon me. Neither my father-in-law nor I ever responded to those desperate cries. Later, my ex-husband and mother-in-law were sued for alimony and subsequently evicted from their mistress's home. Their swift breakup left them homeless, and they reportedly spent some time living in a comic book cafe. Bob paid me alimony, and his mother paid my father-in-law, depleting their savings and leading them into significant debt. Forced into poverty, they now struggle with day jobs just to get by. Meanwhile, I continue to care for my father-in-law at his home. Despite the divorce, he kindly told me, "You're welcome to stay as long as you'd like." Grateful for his generosity, I decided to remain in the house. Recently, with my father-in-law attending a daycare service during the day, I've started working part-time. There will be challenges ahead, but I am determined to do everything I can for my father-in-law and support him through this difficult time.